In the last few videos, we started working on the interface of our app. We added all of the user interface elements, and we actually created all of the IB outlets, which would allow us to interface and work with the storyboard objects. And we did kind of minor UI changes as well. In the last video, it was more focusing on the actual content of the app. So we actually made a struct, which is the structure of each question in the app. So each question within the app will conform to this structure. And it's important that you realize that all of the information that relates to each question needs to be grouped together, and that is the purpose of why we actually need to create this struct. After we did that, we created a questions array here, and this questions array, you can see here that it conforms to this struct here. So it's a questions array which includes this question, and so each element in this array will have a question which conforms to this struct here. Okay, and then we created this function here called load questions, and this will essentially add all of the content to this particular array, and again this is conforming to this particular struct here. So one of the things that we need to do now is we need to really focus on displaying the questions. So that's going to be the focus of this video, and in order to do that, what you need to do is initially create a variable called current question. Now, in order to understand why you need this, we need to talk a little bit about how arrays work, especially the indexing of an array. So as you already know, to access the index values of each array element, we start at 0. So it's 0 based. The first element in the array, the index value of that element is always 0. So essentially it's n-1 as far as the indexing is concerned. And so this current question really corresponds with the index value of each question in that array, and this will be very, very important when we get to the point where we need to move between questions or increment the questions in the array. This will actually be very useful. So what you will need to do is type this out, create a new variable called current question with an initial value of 0. What I'm going to do here is create another function. The purpose of this function again is to display the question. So we're going to call this display questions, and so this is our kind of empty array here. And what we're going to do first of all is access our image. So we're going to add the content of our begin populating the content of these UI elements here. So the first one that we want is the question image outlet. So we'll say question image outlet dot image. So accessing the image property here equals UI image, and then we'll say named. Now at this point I can give it a fixed value, and this is what I intend to do just to see if it works. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add the value 1, and as you already know, 1 refers to the first image. Now before any of this will work, we need to make sure that we're calling these functions. Right now these functions are here within the class file, but they're not being called anywhere. We need to run these functions, and that essentially the proper term is to call this function. So in this special function called viewDidLoad, this allows us to you can call a function in a function. So essentially this is what we're doing here. This is a special function which loads as soon as which runs as soon as the view is loaded up, right? The first view is loaded, and so what we're going to do here is we're going to call two functions, and the first function is load question. So that's what we want to run first. Okay, so once all of the questions have been loaded in the array, then the next function is we can just call this display questions. Okay, and so now we can run this, make sure it's on iPhone 11, and that's the device that you've been designing this on. And so here, this is our startup screen, and you can actually see here, this is our image. Okay, now you can actually see here a little bit of an issue where our text label, our text, the text label is actually hidden behind the image, and that's something that we need to focus on. And maybe what we can do is we can change the order of this. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, where we have the label, question label, so I'm just going to move this here. Okay, so it's, you know, it's at the front here, and then I'm going to try running this again, and hopefully what we should see is we should see the white label. Okay, so yeah, that's a lot better. Obviously this is still not perfect because you can see the image is chopped off, and so we need to do a lot of work with this, but right now we know that this image is being loaded up fine. So it's not really sufficient that we have fixed values in here. Obviously we've added the questions into the array here, and what we need to do is we need to call the questions. We need to actually work with the questions that have been already added to this array. So rather than having a fixed value here, we're going to access the questions array. So we're going to say questions and then square bracket. Now if you recall from one of the examples that you have already worked on, the formative examples, in order to access an element in an array, you need to give it an index number. Okay, so the index number from 0 to n, which is the last element in the array. Now rather than give it a fixed value here, so saying 0 or 1, what we're going to do is we're going to say that this is going to be the current question. Okay, so we're going to say this is the current question, and then we're going to type in a dot. Now all of a sudden what we have here is all of the individual attributes for each question here. So we're going to say here that this is going to be the question image. Okay, so we've accessed the image outlet, the image property here, and we're saying it's a UI image named, and it's from the questions array and question image. So now if we load this, you'll see that hopefully you'll see that the turtle is still there. Okay, which means that we can successfully access the element from the array. So we need to continue working with all of the other elements now, and so the next one is the question text here. Okay, so we've called this question text label. So it's a question text label dot text equals and again back to kind of the array here, questions, so current question dot question text. And again, if we run this right now, you should hopefully see the question text for that particular question, question 0 here. Okay, and we know that is correct because you can see here that that's the first question. Turtle shells are made of how many bones fused together? Okay, so we'll carry on with this. The next one we want to look at is the answer buttons, okay, which will need to include the potential answers. So we'll say answer button outlet dot set title. Okay, so we'll say set title, and then inside here we'll say it's expecting a string for the title, so we'll say questions, and then we'll say current question dot answer 1, and then we'll say here normal dot normal here. Okay, so a button can have different states, and so this last attribute here, what we're saying is assign the title from the list, the button title rather, a value, the first value, which is essentially this over 5. Okay, so over 5 will be assigned to the first button. And so what we can do here is we can run this now, okay, and I can show you that that is working. There it is, over 5. Okay, and we do this for the other buttons as well. So we'll say answer button 2 outlet dot set title, and we'll say questions question dot answer 2 dot normal. Okay, so we do that for all 4 buttons, and I can easily copy this, but I suggest that you type it in just so you get kind of familiar and comfortable with this process. Answer button, set title, and we'll say questions, current question, dot answer 3 for dot normal, and then finally answer button for outlet dot set title questions. Okay, so now we have all of the content populated. We also need to create a new variable, and this variable will give us the ability to see in the future, when we're actually checking to see which answer is correct, this variable will actually store the current selected answer. So we'll say selected answer. Currently it's going to be 0, right? By default it's going to be 0. And then we'll say here, just after this, we'll say selected answer equals questions, and then current question dot correct answer. And we know that this is obviously this is a numerical value. Okay, so if we run this right now, what you should see is the entire view is populated with the content of the first question. Okay, now if we had the functionality right now to cycle through the questions, we will be able to see that every single question has been loaded. However, that is the focus for the next video. Okay, so in this video we looked at how we can create a function to access the different elements within the array and all of the different attributes and information that we've set up for each question, and then assign that information to the user interface. In the next video we will take a look at how we can begin introducing some logic to check to see whether or not the correct button has been pressed and how that corresponds with the correct answer.